Agape love sounds great in theory, but how does it look in response to some of the toughest issues of our day? Darren will lead us in thinking through how a Christ follower can respond to those who do not yet know Jesus. How can we be salt and light when the pressure is on and we're challenged by those around us? How do we respond to family members, co-workers, neighbors, or even strangers who do not share the same biblical view? In this session, we'll be introduced to some responses to 3 current social issues. Be sure and talk about how this principle might help the members of your group in dealing with these real-life issues they're facing. Thank you for your courage and compassion in tackling these big issues in our group.
No matter who they are, no matter what they believe or what they've done, we are called to agape love others unconditionally. Okay, so what does that look like? I mean, does loving everyone mean agreeing with everyone? Does loving everyone mean endorsing everything? Remember the definition we read a moment ago? Part of that definition, verse 6 actually, says, agape does not delight in evil, but agape rejoices with the truth. Oh, so we are to love everyone, but not necessarily agree with everything. But how do you do that? How do you thread that needle? Well, that's actually today's big idea, which is going to serve as our guiding principle. Every week at Broadway Church, we do our best to summarize the teaching in one simple statement that we call our big idea. Well, today's big idea provides us with the true north bearing for agape living in the 21st century. Are you ready? Here's today's big idea. Agape loves the people and lives the truth. Agape loves the people and agape lives the truth. See, whenever you're facing a situation, whenever you're facing a tension in life, ask yourself how you can best live both of these callings. Ask yourself, okay, what can I do to love the people and live the truth in this situation? How can I express patience and kindness and humility and forgiveness and maintain my integrity in my pursuit of the truth all at the same time? There is a way, and that way is the way of agape. Agape loves the people, and agape lives the truth. So the first big question is this: how does agape love respond to someone who holds a political view that is radically opposite to your view? Now, we have a bit of a love-hate relationship with government, don't we? I mean, my family participated in the Points of Light thing this past Halloween. I had a kid walk up to me at our home, and he was dressed in this black pinstripe suit with a tie and everything, trick or treat. And I said, what are you dressed up as? He says, I'm the government. And then he took 42% of my candy, didn't say thanks, and just left. If you want to start a debate in any room at any time, just bring up the topic of politics. And then lob the words Trump and Hillary in and just watch the sparks fly. In fact, I read of a recent poll that found 100% of Americans think 50% of Americans have lost their mind. And this isn't just an American thing. As the values of our nation become more and more secular and more elastic, the stakes are becoming more and more, or I should say higher and higher with each election. And that means the tension is becoming higher and higher with each election. Do you know what it feels like to listen to someone who is spouting something completely opposite to your political views? It can be a maddening experience to hear someone make claims that you believe are false or make promises that you believe are impossible. So how does agape love respond? Agape loves the people and lives the truth. Okay, but how can I apply that principle to politics? Here's a simple reminder, a simple principle to remember and to carry with you. Agape empowers you to protest the policy, yet not detest the person. Agape empowers you to protest the policy and not detest the person. You can march, you can chant, you can shout, you can lobby, you can boycott, you can organize, you can post, you can hand out literature, you can do it all you want. Go at it, knock yourself out. But you need to ensure that you are protesting a policy and not detesting a person. The moment you cross the line from protesting to detesting, you have walked away from agape love. Agape loves the people and lives the truth. How does that apply to the political realm? Agape empowers you to protest the policy and not detest the person. What about the abortion issue? We live in a country here in Canada where, according to the letter of our law, it is completely acceptable to terminate a pregnancy right up until the child has passed through the mother's birth canal. Think about that. We live in a country that has zero protection for life in the womb. How does agape love respond to that? Now, you may be here, and sometime in your past, you yourself have had an abortion. You need to know that the agape love of God is flowing to you right now. You also need to know that I'm not talking about you right now. Right now, I'm talking about those who made it their profession and their purpose to take the life of an unborn child. The question we're trying to answer right now is this: as a follower of Jesus Christ, how do you love someone that you believe is killing innocent human beings for a living? Remember last week, we learned of a man named Saul's role in the death of the very first Christ follower. I should say, in the first martyring, the first killing of a Christ follower. The first martyr as a Christian was named Stephen. And this group of men surrounded Stephen. They carried him outside the city gates, and they surrounded him, and they took off their cloaks because they didn't want to get all bloodied and all brain matter all over them. And they surrounded Stephen, and they threw rocks at him until his skull was bashed in, until he was dead. And the guy who was orchestrating all this, the guy who was guarding all of their cloaks, was a man named Saul. It was Saul's profession, Saul's job, to travel around the region and gather up suspected Christ followers, put them in jail, and have them killed. And the Bible says in the book of Acts that Saul was there approving of Stephen's being killed. And we learned that that Saul is the same man who later became the Apostle Paul, who wrote half of the New Testament. Saul turned into Paul after having a dramatic supernatural encounter with the resurrected Christ. Saul became Paul, Paul who wrote the definition of agape love that we quoted earlier. And we learned that that definition of agape love says agape love always hopes. Remember, last week we learned what that means is agape love is future focused. It always hopes. Agape love is future focused, not failure focused. We learned that when Saul was standing there enjoying the death of Stephen, at that very moment, God was agape loving Saul. Because agape love is future-focused, not failure-focused. Agape love sees people through the eyes of what they could be, not the eyes of just what they presently are. Now, that doesn't mean that God was endorsing Saul's Christian-killing mission. No. God agape loves Saul, not Saul's evil actions. Agape loves the people. Agape lives the truth. So how can we apply this to the abortion issue today? Agape empowers you to hate what's being done, yet not hate the ones doing it. Agape empowers you to hate what's being done, yet not hate the one or the ones doing it. As we taught this past summer in our You Asked For It series, when we discussed specifically the abortion issue, We learn that we should do all that we can to stand up for the sanctity and the value of human life. We should do all that we can to protect the most vulnerable in our society. We learn that we should do all that we can to be a voice for life in a culture of death. But we must do it in a spirit of agape. We must do it in a way that we can protest and not detest. We can hate what's being done, but not hate the ones doing it. As the scriptures teach us in Ephesians chapter 6, we have to remember that our struggle as Christians is not against flesh and blood. It's not against other humans, but against the rulers, authorities, and the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. It is so easy to forget that. It is so easy to lose sight of who our enemy truly is. But agape keeps us focused on reality. Agape loves the people and lives the truth. And when it comes to the issue of abortion, agape empowers you to hate what's being done, yet not hate the ones who are doing it. How does agape love respond to the issue of gay marriage? How does agape love respond when a follower of Christ is invited to a non-Christian gay friend's wedding ceremony? Actually, I see that my time is pretty well up, so I guess we're going to have to do this another day. Let me begin by acknowledging that there is disagreement among Christ followers on this matter. What do I mean? In his letter to the church in ancient Rome, the book of Romans it's called in Scripture, the Apostle Paul acknowledged that there are some matters where godly, intelligent Christ followers are going to disagree. Not everything in our life is black and white, clearly good or evil. In Romans chapter 14, Paul refers to such matters, he calls them disputable matters. Look what he says in Romans 14, starting at verse 1. He says, "Accept him whose faith is weak, without passing judgment on disputable matters." He gives some examples. For example, one man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. Now, the man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not. And the man who doesn't eat everything must not condemn the man who does, for God has accepted him. And then Paul goes on to say, each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. Now, as we learned this past summer when we talked about the biblical response to the LGBTQ issue, we learned that the issue of same-gender sexual relations is not disputable. That's not what's disputable. Nowhere does the Bible permit such a thing. However, whether or not a Christ follower should attend a wedding ceremony between a non-Christian gay couple could very well be classified as a disputable matter. There are godly, intelligent people on both sides of that question. For example, on one side, there are those who believe that a Christ follower has to attend that wedding. These people believe that anything less than attending would be less than loving. For these people, the matter is simple. Go to the wedding. How does agape love respond to such an invitation? Agape love shows up, these people say. Agape love attends in the hope of maintaining that friendship. Agape does all that it can to be the presence of Christ in that couple's life. These people would say, hey, listen, if you expect your non-Christian gay friend to attend your baptismal ceremony, why wouldn't your non-Christian gay friend expect you to attend their wedding ceremony? Listen, by them attending your baptism, you didn't think that they were endorsing your religious views, did you? Of course not. So why do you think that your attendance at their gay wedding means that you are endorsing their gay marriage views? Now, those on the opposite side of this discussion would disagree with that analogy. Oh, the people on the opposite, who hold the opposite view, they agree that you should do all that you can to maintain the relationship. And they also agree that you should do all that you can to represent the presence of Christ in that couple's life. But where these people differ is, these people would say, oh, there's actually a difference between a wedding and a baptism. That's a false analogy you're creating over here. They would point out that unlike a baptism, according to the biblical worldview, invited guests to a wedding are not merely spectators. Invited guests to a wedding are actually participants. Invited guests to a wedding, according to a biblical worldview, you're called upon to be witnesses. You see it in the invitations, don't you? Mr. and Mrs. Kim and Mr. and Mrs. Lee invite you to witness the union of their children. When you're invited to be a guest at a wedding, you're called upon to be a witness. You're called upon to participate in the blessing of that union. That's why it's such an honor to receive a wedding invitation, these people point out. You're being invited to participate. Your presence is part of your blessing. So, the people on this side of the discussion would say that by attending such a wedding ceremony, they're being asked to bless a union that goes against what Scripture teaches. So they're feeling the tension. And they say, so what are you to do when you're invited to bless something that you're convinced God does not bless? How does agape love respond to such moments? How do you love the people and live the truth when you don't feel you can attend? Well, let me say this. Whichever side of this discussion you find yourself landing upon, the truth is that agape lives in the tension that exists between loving the people and living the truth. Whichever side of this discussion you find yourself personally landing upon, agape graciously communicates, I'm saying no to your view, but I'm saying yes to you. I'm saying no to your view, but I'm saying yes to you. What does that mean? It means I don't have to endorse your position on gay marriage in order to agape love you. Agape is unconditional affection. Agape loves people no matter what they're doing or what they're believing. I can say no to your view. I can say no to your position and still say yes to you as a person. I can say no to endorsing the value of your position and still say yes to acknowledging your value as a person.
Well, good evening again, and hopefully you're having a great time in your small group and you're starting to come together as a community, and that you're really kind of digging into this very important concept called agape love, the purest love imaginable. Now, in this particular sermon, Darren, you talked about the various ways that, the rubber hits the road. We put agape love to the test and real situations that, as Canadians, we're facing every single day of the week. And so, as I listened to your sermon, I thought, wow, agape love is a costly love. It takes some courage and strength of character to really manage that tension between not compromising the truth on one hand and loving people who maybe disagree with you on the other hand. So what kind of help can you give us in terms of, building up that courage, building up that muscle that allows us to be dynamic?
Yeah, it's almost like we have to change our default position. And this takes time, admittedly, but we have to change our default position where sometimes as Christ followers, sometimes doesn't make sense, but often as Christ followers, we critique and then love. I critique you and what you believe and what you're saying, but I'm going to love you anyway. No, let's flip that around. Let's make agape our default position. I'm going to agape you before I critique you, and I may not even critique you at all. Think in these terms. Maybe an analogy might be you go into a barn in some farmer's field way out in the interior, and you open the barn and you see this 1955 Ford Thunderbird. Now it's got dents and scratches on it, but it's a 1955 Ford Thunderbird. And you love it. You see its intrinsic value before you critique the dents and scratches. Every human you know is much more valuable than a 55 Ford Thunderbird. So you see their intrinsic value. You love them for who they are before you critique them. The dents and the scratches, yeah, so be it. We all have those. But you have incredible value, and that's what I'm going to acknowledge first.
In an article I just recently wrote, Darren, I kind of mentioned the fact that, the Great Commission, the truth, and the Great Commandment, love, are both important. But perhaps in our culture, in our period of time, like no other, though both of them are important, this is the season to lead with love.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It should be our default position. Love before you critique.
Okay. So you mentioned three things in this sermon, areas, crisis points, places where we have big opportunity to show agape love in ways that will stretch us out. Is there two or three other areas that you sort of figure these are things that we as believers, we're going to have to address this as time goes on?
Yeah, I think there's some cultural hot buttons that, as we record this, that our nation is involved in our culture. I think race relations, immigration issues, there are tensions there that I think agape could really step in and help soothe. I think there's the tension between the secular, progressive, and religious or a theistic worldviews that more and more is coming up in even our legal system, that where agape is going to have to flavor and rule our responses. We have rights, but we also have our agape command as well. I think these are a couple key areas that agape is going to need to rule.
Yeah, I think the challenge we face is not trying to objectify other people, especially if they disagree with us, but to realize they're all people who Jesus died for.
Yeah.
They're all people he wishes to have in heaven. They may not respond to him, but that's his desire for them. And so I need to show them the same kind of respect and care that God does.
Goes back to what we said earlier, our default position, love before you critique.
Okay. So I hope you've had a great night tonight. Next week is a very important week, because we want you to give us some feedback. Next week, week 7, as you get together in your Purest Love Imaginable group, we want you to give us some practical ideas coming out of your group about how do we help people love God better using agape love, but how do we show more agape love within the community that is Broadway Church? And then to go one step further, how do we export this and start becoming famous for agape love in the city of Vancouver? We need your help. Think about it this week. And we'll be looking forward for your feedback next week.
Do your homework.
Do your homework. Thank you. Good night.
Today, we really engaged to some significant areas where showing agape love is difficult. I hope what was discussed today has helped to be better equipped to deal with the issues you face. Next week is a very important week. We want to hear from you of ways Broadway can show more agape love. Be sure to think about the Great Commission at the end of your guide, and have a good night.